travel and things in association with Rugged Wear, real people, real clothing, real solutions, present In Conversation With. I'm your host, David Batsoffen, and today my guest is the inimitable Alan Committie. And we're going to be chatting about his new show that's just opened here in Gauteng, Live and Let Laugh. Alan, how you doing?
Mr. Batsoffen, what a pleasure, what a delight. Hello, sir.
How are you?
Yeah, ticking along, thank you. You find me back in Cape Town on this particular Tuesday, but I return to Joburg soon to continue the run. On my off days, I tend to come home and pick up some admin stuff and do some busynesses. But we're having a fab run at Monte Casino and loving being back with a new show.
Because you were saying in one of your Facebook tweets that fun was being headed.
Yeah, that's the past blue perfect tense, of course, as everyone knows.
Yeah, of course. And you better be aware, if you come to an Alan Committie show, there is going to be a small pop quiz at the audience at the end of the show.
Always.
You know,
concentration is everything.
As you know, with Oprah, it was you get a car, everybody gets a car. You go to Alan Committie, you get a pencil and paper, you get a pencil and paper, everybody gets a pencil and paper. The show that I saw the Sunday matinee, and it was a lovely audience. Now, I know that you gave away a box of chocolates to some guy. I'm hoping he shared them, or did you not find out at the end of the show?
I didn't actually find out. I know in previous, we give every show a little reward, as it were, to the person who wins one particular segment of the show. And I know that on some nights where I have asked them to share, they have. And as you suggested, in fact, they've given out to large proportions of the audience. But I suspect some are greedier than others. So who can tell what evil lurks in the hearts of men?
Well, this is it, because I didn't, I wasn't watching my watch, which would have been rude because I was in the front row and you would have had something to say about it.
Spoken about that.
No doubt. But at the end of the day, I didn't realize how quickly the time went by. And by the time you said, how are we going to close the show? I sort of went, but hang on a second, what happened to interval?
Yeah. Well, you know, as you've seen many of my shows in the past, and traditionally I would have an interval, of course, that also just serves the theatre. They make some bar sales and whatever. I suppose in these strange times now, most people are happy not to be given the choice of mingling amongst people. So we've taken the interval away for now. I suspect it will come back in the future. But you're right. You know, even when I'm creating the show and I work with Weare, I will often say, oh, do I have enough material? Do I have enough material? Until that moment when I put everything together and I present it to Chris and he goes, you're touching 2 hours. And I go, oh, I have too much material. So, and you know, the more, I mean, you saw the second weekend, the end of the second weekend's performance. So I'm starting to get pretty good now at knowing the material and I've refined it every night. And so I'm very happy with the shape of the show now. But because I'm very au fait with it and I'm comfortable with it, it means I improvise more because I know that the material is set, which actually means the tighter the show, the longer the show, weirdly enough. And when I tell my stage manager, Francois, well, I've cut some stuff, and he goes, oh, great, it's going to be a longer show. And I go, yes, you know me too well.
well, this is the problem. I mean, a lot of your show, well, not a lot, but some of it is reactive with the audience. I don't want to say it's audience participation because that scares people.
Yes, no, it's certainly not. But
you inquire from the audience certain things,
right?
And which they have to respond to. And you are very quick on the uptake. I'll give you that. Hecklers would stand no chance against you, really and truly. And I'm sure you've proved it on more than one occasion.
Listen, first of all, in the safety and the comfort of a theatre environment, you don't often get very rude hecklers. And so, again, I think it's important to reiterate, I don't want to embarrass people in the audience, and I'm certainly not there to have their direct participation. In my mind, what I'm trying to do is sew their responses into a kind of tapestry of the show so that every show is unique, because in that particular show, it's Simon's older response to James Bond, which is influenced by young Jenna's youthful throwaway comment about Daniel Craig, that makes that particular performance different from the night before when Cynthia farted loudly early in the show and we had to engage with that, for example. So it's those. I actually wish that had happened. But I suppose that's what I'm trying to do, is to make every show unique. And it also informs my energy and my performance, because, you know, I often tell friends or people that I've met, once I know you, I've spoken to you, I don't want to speak to you again in the audience. For me, I want to be surprised by talking to strangers. And because then I feel like I'm at my best, I can respond. I also don't want people to suddenly say, oh, you've got a plant in the audience and you've planned all of this. That's not part of it. Part of it for me is to keep me present, keep my brain active, and make that show feel very pertinent and in the moment for that particular audience.
Is that why you took away the stairs to that stage, in case somebody wanted a Will Smith moment with you?
Now, that's so weird you asked, because I did say, where are the stairs? And they said, oh, well, you're not going to have people come up and down. And I was like, oh, all right. I got to tell you that your show was the first time I did that particular gag, because I'm talking about James Bond, for those who haven't seen the show. The theme is around Bond. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah, we will in a moment.
I do have a shoulder holster because I've got a fake gun which is part of one of the earlier gags in the show.
Yeah.
But having taken off my jacket at one point in the show, which I hadn't done before, I suddenly realized the shoulder holster, which had been invisible to the audience, was now suddenly seen. And in the moment I went, I'm holding this, I've got this gun in case someone tries to slap me, which I thought was a pretty good gag under the circumstances.
So now that you brought it up, tell us the premise of the show.
Sure.
And firstly, congratulations. This is your 25th one-man show.
That's right. Yeah. So that was the starting point. Normally I would start a new show in Cape Town over the festive season.
Yeah.
I've done that for almost 10 years. We'd run it over December, Jan, and then I would bring that show to Joburg and then tour it to either festivals or other smaller cities or locations for the year. But because of Omicron in this last holiday, we postponed my show. And instead, over the couple of weeks that we were allowed to perform, we just did a comedy lineup show with some friends. But it meant suddenly this year started, and I thought, well, it's important for me to have a new show, because I use a lot of that material then to inform my corporate work or any new performances I'm doing if people have seen me repeatedly. And I said to Peter, well, maybe we should start in Joburg this year. So the premise was, I went, oh, and I've just realized it's my 25th solo comedy show. That's quite a milestone. I'm pretty proud of that. And then I started thinking, well, how do you, because that's quite big, and do we go back and do some things from the previous shows? And then, of course, I suddenly realized that it was also Bond 25 had just come and gone. Daniel Craig in No Time to Die. So that was really it felt like an easy connection. Then I thought, is that going to be hard? Actually, it turned out to be a lot of fun to investigate and explore some of the Bond, because I have been a big Bond fan over the years.
Right.
But actually, unpack it comically was, I've got to tell you, loads of fun for me. And so essentially that's what I've looked at. And I suppose the deeper, if you will, underpinning of it is that James Bond has, we've seen over the years, lost his identity in a modern world. We don't quite know where a 007 fits in. There's either too many action heroes around him, or of course he's seen as misogynistic or sexist or whatever. And then I thought, well, that's also true of all of us, because we're living in this new world now where every day seems like new regulations, jumping from level to level, but with kind of inconsistent parameters. We've got a war that's happening in Europe that could become a world war. I think we're all feeling a little lost in the world. So what's my role as a comedian? So that was a serious underpinning, but it kind of informed, how does Alan Committie also relate to James Bond, who's also trying to find his way? And so with that in mind, I then created loads of sketches and stand-up, and it informed some of my stand-up, because part of it was to go, how can I, if James Bond has good fashion and travels exotically and understands gadgets, what's the reality for this man who's 48 years old and trying desperately to get his, find his way in four ways in Johannesburg? And I don't want to upset you, but it's very different from James Bond's experience.
Although with the new Bond, I'm not so sure, but I don't want to give away too many spoilers for the movie for people who haven't watched it.
Right, and you'll notice I didn't either. I mean, I think that's for those who haven't seen it. Yeah, exactly.
Well done, you. What I didn't know, and I learned from you, two things during the show. So your show is both informative, educational, and a pleasure to be at.
Right.
Firstly, I learned that you can give CPR to staying alive by the beaches.
Yes, and that is a known fact.
It is a known fact.
when I was told that, I thought, no, that can't be true. And then before even Googling it, I asked a couple of friends who, one was a doctor and a couple who I know have worked in, and they all immediately knew the answer. And then I Googled and went, well, there you are. Everyone seems to know it except me. And now we all know.
Now we all know it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'd forgotten was that David Niven played Bond in that satirical version of Dr. No.
That's right. It was called Casino Royale.
Casino Royale. Sorry, yeah.
That's right. And it was Woody Allen was in it. David Niven, Peter Sellers was in it. It was a whole host of people playing James Bond. It was a terrible flop at the time, but it's got kind of developed some cult status over the years.
It's like all of those.
Of course, it makes up, because there are actually 27 Bonds, but 25 of them are from the Eon company, the Broccolis, the producing company. And then the two extras are that one, Casino Royale, and Never Say Never Again, which was a one that Sean Connery did, but wasn't actually made by the Eon company.
But of course, with a surname like Broccoli, it leaves people like yourself so much material. You don't have to even write it. It writes itself.
Come on. If you are called Chubby Broccoli, how can you not be a vegan fantasy? I mean,
exactly. I think And the other thing that I was talking about subsequent to me seeing your show was the fact that you're one of those comedians that it's a proper family show, because you don't rely on using bad language. Yes, you get, as I said in my review of your show, you never complete a bad word. You start it and then you just leave it alone. You only have to go, and then people know where you're going with it.
Exactly. That I've said this before, perhaps even on one of your interviews. It wasn't conscious right at the beginning, but after a couple of shows, it kind of made sense to me financially as well, because you can appeal to a bigger group of people. You can bring your grandparents, you can bring your youngsters. And I was actually sharing this with a friend yesterday, and I'd forgotten this. There's a kid in Joburg who first started coming to watch me when he was 6 years old.
Are you kidding?
He is now 14, so he's watched 8 of my shows. Every year he comes, every year afterwards, I sign a poster of his in the foyer. And this little lad, who's just magnificent, when he was 6, he was getting jokes that nobody else was getting in the audience. So he was well on my wavelength. But it delights me that I can, pitch it to really youngsters and the old folk as well. And part of that is the pleasure of finding ways to create comedy and comedy material without necessarily have to go down too shocking a route or too vulgar a route. Of course, there's innuendo. Of course, there's naughtiness.
For sure.
Of course, there's the suggestion of, but people's minds are much worse than mine. I promise you, they're coming up with much better jokes than I am. And good luck, they do half the work for me.
But do you find you'll start a gag and somebody in the audience will get it literally on the first 2 words? They're on your leg, they know where you're going with the gag. And you could literally turn away. You could turn upstage and just stand there, and the laughter would wave through would wash through the theatre.
One of the pleasures of working with someone like Chris Weare is we can spend hours and hours dissecting and unpacking the mechanics of comedy. And we love those. We will talk about the nature of jokes. So, I mean, for those who've never seen me, there's some brilliant comics in this country, and we've been very lucky. And I know you've seen a couple of them. My mentor, Mark Banks, Nick Rabinowitz has been around. Mark Lottring's just been at the backs at Monte, Conrad Koch, and they've all got their own particular styles. I'm very much more of a joke teller comedian. In other words, I do use my own personal experiences. I do offer some kind of commentary, but the structure of my material is very much joke based, and we will sit and talk about, do we want to surprise the audience with this punchline, or do we want them to anticipate the punchline? And the pleasure is in just moving slowly and inexorably towards that punchline where they're well ahead of us and are laughing, and then we still go for the punchline, which makes them laugh more. And I think there's great pleasure in those kind of constructions. It goes, I mean, I'm a huge fan of people like Mel Brooks and Billy Crystal and Martin Short, who work in that kind of tradition where, they take their personal experiences and they write beautifully, but they are very carefully considered joke structures. Believe me, it delights me when that happens.
There was a show many years ago in Joburg called Cinderella. It was an adult pantomime. And at one particular point, one of the actors says, "Get the door." and I was the only person in the audience who knew what was coming. And I was laughing like a drain before one of the actors walked on stage with the door.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there's man, it's fantastic. And it's very much a kind of Goons-based, Spike Milligan-based humor, and it's beautiful. But listen, I love language, and I love the fact that, and I'll do it even when I'm talking to an audience. My task in many ways in my head is whatever you say, is there another meaning to what you're saying? So if someone says, hi, what do you do? I'm a counselor. I go, brilliant. How long have you worked for the municipality for? And then they go, no, I do industrial counseling. And I go, brilliant. And so do you work with deep drains? And so it's to always take either a too literal or a very figurative, and that in itself just creates great pleasure.
Now, you've mentioned Chris Weare on more than one occasion in the time we've been chatting. And again, people say to me, why does a comedian need a director? And if they've listened to us so far, they will realize that you very definitely need somebody, another set of eyes, just to make sure that the path you're taking is the right one. And we're not going to, the audience is not going to arrive at 2 o'clock and leave it to the following morning with you still talking on stage.
100%. And one of the things, Chris, I mean, literally, he's done most of the 24 or 25 now solo shows I've been with. And he was my lecturer at drama. I've always admired and respected him because he understands mechanics of comedy. I've got to tell you, when you're working with him, he's not a big laugher. So that's sometimes disconcerting. I will share material and he'll pause and he'll go, yes, that's very funny. And I want to say, well, you could laugh if you wanted to, but maybe that's prepared me for some of the audience members who come and sit and stare at me as well. But Chris is brilliant in the way that he will shape, as you say, he will sit on the outside. It's not directing necessarily in the way that you would a straight play or a musical. Obviously, sometimes he might suggest your placement on stage, or but very much around helping me recognize what are important setup words. And this is something I've learned over the years, and I now kind of do almost instinctively. But you help an audience, you give clues to an audience by the setup in your joke. So you could say, for example, don't you find it frustrating in a bank when? Now we know that we're looking for frustrations, as opposed to, isn't it shocking when? Now you're looking for a moment of shock. Isn't it hilarious when? So those cue words and clue words kind of become quite interesting. And as you get better as a comedian, you do that instinctively anyway. You know how you're trying to set up a gag. Often when I watch other comics and they're trying new material in a club, or I will talk to them after and say, you've got the kernel of such a beautiful routine there, but you're actually not giving clues to an audience as to what they've got to find funny. And so they often, comedians always focus on the punchline. For me, the setup is almost more important than the punchline, because the setup can give you 3 different punchlines, whereas a punchline is only once used, if that makes sense.
But now people who are watching this may go, hang on a second, we recognize his face, but where is the beard and an accent? Because you are currently on Mnet as well, playing one of the characters in the new Sally Andrews series.
That's right. Yeah, Recipes for Love and Murder. I mentioned this in the show because I talk about how some actors get to travel to exotic places when they're on shoot. I was lucky enough to be cast in this fantastic new Mnet series, and I was excited to see where I might travel to on my location shoot. Well, they sent me to the middle of the Karoo to Prince Albert, which, by the way, is absolutely gorgeous and lovely. And this series was a delight to shoot. We spent almost 6 months shooting it, and it's currently on TV. So yeah, that was fun to do. I haven't been on TV. You know, you were around when I still did Laugh Out Loud all those years ago. And I've done a couple of smaller things since, and I've written a couple of things for television. But to actually be in front of the camera again was lots of fun, and flexing muscles.
You also flexed your Shakespearean muscle was it 2 years ago?
Well, it's 2 years because of COVID. Yeah, I did Richard III at Maynardville, and that was a lot of fun. And in fact, we're now planning a little Iago at some point. Early next year, which I'm very excited about. So yeah, listen, I do like to, Joburg hasn't seen much of it, weirdly enough, mostly because of COVID. 2 of the productions we were hoping to bring have fallen away, and that's not to say they won't happen in the future, but I do every year try and do something that's outside of the stand-up genre. And so COVID stopped us doing a brilliant production, well, if I dare say so myself, of The Producers. I was lucky enough to be playing Max Bialystock. We're hoping to bring that to Joburg early
Yeah,
next year when we go back to 100%.
Because you started rehearsals for the producers literally just before they went, let's all close up shop and go home.
We actually managed to get a month worth of performances out in Cape Town.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to do that, and we had such fun. It was a glorious cast, and so we really do want to revisit that at some point. Over the last couple of years, I've done a David Mamet, Oleanna, which is a very heavy two-hander but beautiful. The Richard III, and then we've got, I can't announce it yet, but I am meeting Lord Peter Turin this very afternoon. One of the reasons I'm back in Cape Town, to discuss a beautiful play that will definitely come to Joburg in October. And that's it's a classic American text, is what I can share with you. Okay. And I think it will be a delight for people to come and see. So let's see.
Godfather 3, the musical.
You got it in one.
Yeah. It's Wordle, I tell you. When you start, I have specifically kept Wordle off my phone. I'm not interested in Wordling. I'm not interested in people on Facebook who go, oh, look at me, I'm so clever and intellectual.
It's very addictive.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
It's best to stay away, is my feeling.
Alan, how long is your run in Joburg? Because it's not a consistent run. You sort of do Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
That's right. So when we decided to do this run, there were a couple of things that I had already committed to. So this week, for example, we're on this whole weekend, Friday to Sunday. There are 4 performances, and I think Friday night and Sunday are basically full, as I understand, but we've definitely got tickets for the 2 shows on Saturday. And then next week is a full week. We go Wednesday right through to Sunday. And we're even talking about putting in a second show on the Sunday. So it's limited shows, but if you can get there, I would love to see your faces, because I think we're having good fun.
As I said in my review, if they missed your show earlier this year and missed this one, then they only have themselves to blame, really and truly. Stand outside and scalp tickets if necessary, because it's what? How long is the show? 90 minutes?
Yeah, 94 minutes basically.
Yeah, there or thereabouts. And it's just the most wonderful time. You're away from Ukraine. You're away from COVID. You don't care about the beggars on the street corners, the traffic lights that don't work. You mentioned intersections in your show, and when we drove home, my wife and I, we found 2 that weren't working and 1 that had an accident.
Oh man, it's sometimes the safest place in the world is inside a theater and just in your own minds, which is lovely.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. Alan Committie, Live and Let Laugh, on currently here in Johannesburg at Monte Casino at Peter Turin's theater there. Miss it and you will miss out, really and truly. And a word of advice, don't sit in the front row necessarily, because you may just get picked on. But with that being said, why do people leave the front row empty? Sit there. Let the person on stage know that there is an audience and one that is being engaging. Alan, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to chat with you. I wish you all the best for the rest of the run, and I look forward to October and whatever that may bring.
Thank you, David. We'll see you soon. Cheers, guys.